I was still holding the plate when my father started speaking. The room had already settled into that soft, polite silence people use when they expect something important. Glasses were lifted. Halfway conversations paused mid-sentence and no one looked at me. "This is a celebration of the real family," he said. A few people smiled, unsure, waiting for something to follow. I waited for him to say my name. He didn't. He kept talking, thanking everyone else as if I wasn't standing there. No one corrected him. My mother didn't look at me. I understood then I was not included. I didn't leave right away. That's the part I remember most clearly now. Not the words, not the silence, but the fact that I stayed. I stood there with the plate, still in my hands long after it stopped making sense to hold it. People had already moved on. Conversations restarted in soft waves like nothing had happened. A few guests leaned closer to each other, speaking in low voices, carefully avoiding looking. In my direction, it was subtle, but it was there. My father continued at the head of the table, steady and composed. He spoke like a man who believed every word he was saying. There was no hesitation in his voice, no glance toward me, no pause to reconsider. That certainty was what made it worse. If he had stumbled, I could have forgiven it. If he had laughed it off, I could have followed, but he didn't. He spoke with intention, and no one challenged him. I finally placed the plate down gently so it wouldn't draw attention. It felt strange, letting go of it, like I was setting down something more than just porcelain. I stepped back just enough to be out of the center of the room, but still close enough to hear everything. I don't know why I stayed within earshot. Maybe I thought I would hear something that would fix it, some correction even if it came late. It didn't. Instead, I heard my father thanking my sister. He mentioned her by name, his voice softening in a way I recognized. He spoke about her, support her loyalty, how she had always been there when it mattered. I watched her nod slightly, accepting it. Not surprised, not uncomfortable. Just used to it. That part stayed with me longer than anything else, because it meant this wasn't new. It just wasn't new to them. I shifted my weight, suddenly aware of how out of place I felt in a room I had helped prepare. The table settings, the food, even the small details people were quietly enjoying. I had taken care of those. No one had asked me to. But I had done it anyway. That's how it had always been. I filled in the gaps. I made things easier. I stayed quiet, so everything else could run smoothly. And in return, I was optional. My mother finally moved. Then, standing to refill someone's glass, she passed close enough to me that our shoulders almost touched. For a moment, I thought she might say something. Even just a glance would have been enough. She didn't. She kept walking, her expression unchanged, her attention fixed on the guests. Wasn't coldness? That would have been easier to understand. It was something quieter, something practiced, like she had already decided where not to look. I felt something settle inside me. Then not sharp, not overwhelming, just steady, a kind of quiet. Understanding. This wasn't about one moment, it wasn't about one sentence said in the wrong way. This was a decision, not a loud one, not even a spoken one, but a decision repeated over time until it became normal. I looked back at my father. He was smiling, now raising his glass again as others followed. The room filled with the soft sound of agreement, glasses touching, voices lifting slightly. I didn't raise anything. I just stood there empty-handed now, watching it happen. And for the first time I stopped, waiting for someone to notice. It didn't start that night. That was just the first time I stopped explaining it away. When I was younger, I used to think I was just quieter than everyone else, that maybe I blended into the background because I didn't try hard enough to stand out. It felt easier to believe that than to question why no one seemed to look for me. There were small moments. They didn't feel important at the time. They felt ordinary, like birthdays where my cake was placed at the edge of the table while everyone gathered around someone else, or school events where I would scan the crowd knowing they were there but never quite finding their faces looking back at me. I told myself it wasn't intentional. I told myself people were busy, that families didn't always move in perfect sync, but patterns don't need to announce themselves. They just repeat until you stop ignoring them. My sister learned early how to speak in ways that were heard. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When she asked for something, it was considered. When she spoke, people paused. I learned something different. I learned how to wait. I learned how to measure the room before saying anything, and most of the time deciding not to. It wasn't fear, it was efficiency. There never seemed to be space for both of us, so I made myself smaller, not in a way anyone would point out, not enough to be noticed, just enough to keep things easy. My father liked things easy. He liked conversations. That didn't challenge him, situations that didn't require him to choose. And over time, I understood something without it ever being said out loud. Choosing me would have required effort, and effort was something he saved for what he valued most. There were times he relied on me quietly, without acknowledgement. If something needed fixing, I was there. If something went wrong, I handled it before it became visible. I became good at anticipating problems, smoothing them out before they reached him. Trusted that, but trust isn't the same as recognition. It's quieter than that. More convenient. I remember one evening years before that dinner when guests had come over unexpectedly. My mother was overwhelmed, my sister was out, and everything felt slightly unprepared. I stepped in without being asked. Cooked, arranged, managed the details. By the time they arrived, everything looked effortless. My father greeted them at the door, smiling confident. He introduced the evening like it had always been. Under control. He didn't mention me then either. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching it unfold, feeling that same strange distance I would later recognize more clearly. Not excluded, just unnecessary to mention. And that was the difference I didn't understand. At the time, being excluded is loud. It has edges. Being unnecessary is quiet. It fades into everything else. Over the years, I adjusted to that role without realizing it. I became the person who made things easier, who filled spaces without taking them up. It worked. There were no arguments, no tension, no scenes. Everything moved smoothly, and I mistook that for belonging, until that night standing in that room hearing my father define the real family out loud. I saw it for what it was. Wasn't that I didn't fit. It was that I had never been counted, not in the way that mattered. And the most unsettling part wasn't the realization itself. It was how familiar it felt. The shift didn't happen all at once. It came quietly, the way most things did in that house. A few days after the dinner, my father asked me to sit with him. His tone was neutral, almost casual, like he was discussing something routine. We were at the dining table again, but this time it was just the two of us. No guests, no glasses raised, no performance. He slid a folder across the table. "I need you to look over this," he said. I opened it without thinking. Documents printed neatly clipped together, property papers, account summaries. A few pages with my name already written in places I hadn't expected to see. I felt a small pause inside me. Not alarm. Not yet. Just attention. "It's simpler this way," he continued. "You're organized. You understand these things better." I nodded slightly, scanning the pages. It didn't take long to understand what he was asking. Access, authority, responsibility, not ownership, not recognition, just the weight of handling something that would never be mine. He wanted me to sign, not as a beneficiary, not as someone included, as someone useful. I looked up at him, then really looked. His expression was steady, patient. There was no pressure in his posture, no visible urgency. He believed this was reasonable, expected even. That familiarity returned. The same. Quiet assumption that I would step in, smooth things out, carry what needed to be carried without question. A few months earlier, I would have signed without hesitation. I would have told myself it meant trust, that it was a form of closeness, even if it didn't look like it, but something had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. "I'll need time to read everything," I said. It was a simple sentence, calm, measured. He nodded once like it was a formality. Of course, but I didn't open the folder again that day. I left it on the table and walked away. That evening, I sat alone in my room with the door closed. The house moved around me in its usual rhythm, voices, footsteps, doors opening and closing. Nothing felt different on the outside, but inside something had settled into place. I thought about every moment that had led here, every quiet task, every unspoken expectation, every time I had stepped forward without being asked and stayed invisible afterward. This wasn't a new role. This was just a larger version of it, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to accept it. The next morning, I returned the folder. "I won't be signing," I said. No explanation. No long reasoning. Just the truth placed gently between us. He didn't react immediately. He looked at me for a moment as if waiting for something else to follow. When nothing did, his expression changed slightly. Not anger, not disappointment, just recalculation. "Is there a problem?" he asked. "No." I said, "It just doesn't involve me." That was the closest I had ever come to saying it out loud. He leaned back in his chair, quiet now. The room felt still, but not tense. Just unfamiliar. He nodded once, slowly, and took the folder back. "All right," he said, and that was it. No argument, no raised voices, no attempt to convince me otherwise, but something had been crossed.